Hello, welcome to the Mediocre Takes podcast, the podcast where we share our mediocre takes on the shows and movies we watch. I'm Marco and I'm here with my co host Mel. How are you doing, Mel?
I'm hungry.
Yeah, and you're eating. Today we're going to be talking about another season of the Trauma Train, Infinity Train. I like to call it the Trauma Train because it's all about trauma.
Yeah, especially in this season.
Yeah, this season was dark. Anyways, we're gonna get into it. So we start off the first episode with everyone in the mall car. They invade another train car and destroy everything. We cut to Grace and Simon back in the mall car where Grace is receiving gifts from the children of the cult. They decide to invade another mall car, which turns out to be the unfinished car from season 1. Suddenly the train car starts moving, so Grace and Simon are about to leave, but Simon gets caught and Grace has to help him. We learned cars aren't supposed to move if there's people inside. They go to the next train car, and that's how the episode ends. I really loved the foreshadowing in the beginning of this episode. I like when we hear the line and find it ironic. Life's too short to only look for difference. When we hear that line, that's when we first see Simon because his whole arc is opposite from the song meaning, and I just find that really ironic and funny. I really love the introduction of Grace and Simon in this episode. The song and the foreshadowing and the way Grace acts at the beginning of the episode without saying anything already tells us about her like carefree and manipulative nature. Also, the character who plays Grace and Simon sing a part in the beginning song, When I Look at You, I See Me, which I thought was a cool touch. They sing the lines, I'm from the West and you're from the East, and some other lines. I really like that we get to see the unfinished car again. Also, we get to see a theater and Grace wearing a yellow mask along with two characters that are masks. Now, I don't know if the creator planned this out, but there's a meaning behind the two masks. That means one is a comedy and one is a tragedy. And typically, the comedy has a happy ending while tragedies don't. Now, I think this was foreshadowing for Grace and Simon's different endings, but that could just be me.
Yeah, I will say I did like the song in the beginning. I thought it was cute. My favorite line. Okay, I did not pick up on anything that you were like talking about where there was a lot of meaning in the song. I didn't pick up on it at all. My favorite line was you like to rhyme and I don't know how. It's objectively not that funny, but that shit cracked me up. I think it reminded me of the like, hi, I'm Jared. I'm 19. I don't know how to read. I do not like that these fuckers were literally torturing and killing sentient objects. Grace and Simon tease each other way too much. They do it too often, and it literally got so annoying so fast for me. So, once again, the tortoises are being fucked with, and honestly, they didn't deserve any of this. But I did like to see them reference previous cars and characters. Yeah, and Grace should have left Simon to die.
It's episode 2. Grace and Simon go through a train car that's forest themed. They hear a noise that pushes them away. Simon uses some kind of magnetic shoes to climb up a tree. They decide to trap a knoll because there's a knoll in the train car that's causing all the trees to go down. Grace and Simon get captured by the knoll. The knoll tickles Grace and Simon. We meet a girl, Hazel, and her knoll, Tuba. Hazel shows Grace her number, but Hazel's number isn't glowing. Tuba and Hazel decide to travel with Grace and Simon. It's weird how Grace is so good at manipulating people, yet I feel like she doesn't change enough by the end. Like, she's still a bit manipulative in a way, which is something I can go into. I just really wish this season was longer because I want to see Grace like fully grow. I just wish you got to see Grace get her exit because I feel like I want to see her like completely grow as a person. Also, if I met Grace, she would probably manipulate me. Now, I'm going to go into spoilers for this season, but later we find out Hazel is a creation of Amelia, which is why Hazel's number is the same number as Amelia when she first got on the train. I find it so fascinating that she's basically like Amelia's daughter in a way. I'll be going over the clues of Hazel being Amelia's creation.
I really like the vibe of this car. I love the colors and the plant life and the animals. It looks so cool, especially at night. Hazel and Tuba are so cute. I love that Hazel basically spit in Simon's face and then Tuba almost smashed his skull open with a rock. Hazel should have let her do it. Simon should have died so much sooner.
Grace and Simon talk about how to get rid of Tuba, and we learn that Simon had a null and their relationship didn't go well. We learn that they think 1-1 is an evil robot who took over the train, and that the true conductor was a man with the highest number who saved Grace's life. We learn Tuba used to have kids. They go to the next train car where they need to do a waltz or some kind of ballroom dance of some kind. Simon tries to find a way out while Grace and Hazel learn the dance. It turns out Hazel doesn't remember much about her past. They dance and get their way out of the train car. Grace's number goes down, and that's how the episode ends. Okay, so one clue that we get in this episode, which I'm gonna try my best to explain this, but when they're doing the ballroom dance, the only way they manage to get out of the ballroom dance room is because of Grace and Simon, not because of Hazel. Like Hazel is a denizen, and because of that, she can't actually get out of that room because she's not human. It requires a person with the number to get out of that room.
Yeah, retrospectively, there were a lot of clues. I just sort of thought she was special at first.
Hazel somehow knows that the dance they're doing is a ballroom dance that requires two people, and she says dances are couple bonding activities. How does she know this stuff if she wasn't created by Amelia? Simon has no empathy, fails to see how Hazel is attached to Tuba, even though he had a null which he was attached to, which I find fascinating. He has no empathy for other people compared to Grace, who is a manipulator but does show empathy for other people. Grace is obviously conflicted at the end of the episode and probably felt bad for Tuba.
We are basically told that Tuba lost her kids and Hazel is like her kid, which made me even more mad knowing what happens to her. I also think it makes more sense if Grace led in the dance. By the way, just a little nitpick. She definitely seems like she'd wear the pants, if you know what I mean. Not a fan of Hazel being initiated into their stupid fucking cults.
Episode 4. Simon, Grace, Hazel, and Tuba are on a snowy train car. They find a cabin to hide out in and they meet the cat, and Simon has a bad reaction to seeing her. Simon goes to explore a room and finds a statue of a cockroach monster. We learned that the cat abandoned Simon when running away from a cockroach monster, which is called a gome apparently. Simon calls out Grace for not caring about him and his struggle. Grace tells Simon that her number has been going down. They learn that all the water is Randall, including the snow, and ask Randall to stop the snow. And the episode ends with them going to the next train car. I love Grace, but oh my god, I cannot stand her in this episode. Like, she completely ignores Simon, even though Simon is clearly showing signs that he's traumatized from the moment he sees the cat. It's so frustrating to watch, and I get that she's worried about her number going down, but I don't know, man, that doesn't excuse it. I love that we get more foreshadowing in this episode with Simon and the cockroach monster statue, because like he falls down when he sees the cockroach monster statue, and he's like literally in that same position when he dies, and it's just perfect. And I love that we get to see Randall again.
Once again, Hazel is iconic and says one of the best lines after Grace asked what she would do without her, which was something like you would die until you're dead. And something about her like serious face was just so funny. We once again get to see old characters. We also get to meet Frank. I love Frank, and overall, I love that this show is able to create background characters that are always so charming and lovable and makes you want to know more about them. That's actually why the cancellation of this show to me is even more sad. As you've stated before, the creator planned so much for this show, and no doubt we would have seen so much more of the established background characters. We found out that Simon is a little bitch because a fucking cat abandoned him. I don't know why, but I literally like don't care about him or his feelings. Like you were talking about how he was obviously like traumatized and stuff, but something about him, like I don't know, he's just a fucking brat ever since the first time I saw him in this show, and I literally cannot feel any empathy for him.
Something you mentioned is that Hazel says you die until you're dead if I left you or something like that. And when Hazel does leave Grace, Grace almost dies.
Coincidence? I think not.
Episode 5. They get into another train car where there's another train puzzle. Tuba and Simon seem to get along as they try to solve the puzzle. The train car starts moving and Grace thinks 1-1 found them. The train car is about to move, so Tuba throws Hazel, but then Tuba is about to fall. Simon goes back for Tuba and he ends up murdering Tuba. Hazel turns out to be a turtle thing, and that's the end of the episode. This episode also has some foreshadowing about Tuba's death, and I just want to mention it. Like, there's this scene where Tuba is about to fall before she falls, and Simon helps her, but in the end, Simon kills her. Simon is an asshole, and I hate him so much. I really like how creative this train car is. Like, having colors you see be walls and having them change constantly is a great idea, and I miss Tuba. She didn't deserve to die. and I hate Simon so much for that.
Yes, we're finally on the same page. I love to see Grace and Simon fighting. It's so fun for me. Roy is a fun character, but they didn't need to give him toes. Something about the fact that it's socially acceptable to talk about your foot fetish has ruined feet for me in general. Every time I see toes, even if they're from a fictional 2D character, I don't. It feels like pornography. We get the one of the good one lines, which is such a funny line. It's my favorite one to hear from like fearmongers who meet the people they were told to hate and then they find out that what they were told is false. I think that, like as you stated before, there was foreshadowing with Tuba's death. I think that the foreshadowing of Tuba's death in the car with, Simon helping her up should have maybe happened a little bit before the death, or the death should have happened a little bit later. Once again, I know that the creator is like dealing with 10, 11-minute episodes, so pacing needs to be tight in some places, but I think the death would have been a bit more impactful if there was just more time between those scenes. And Harambe has nothing on Tuba. Like, if we think about impactful gorilla deaths, dude, Tuba has Harambe beat.
Okay, episode 6. Hazel is in the bargaining stage of grief, but Grace tells her that it's not her fault that Tuba died. They decide to not tell Simon that Hazel is a null. Hazel says she wants to have a funeral for Tuba and says it would be good for her to go. Simon waits at the exit of the train car because he doesn't want to deal with the funeral, and Grace and Hazel go to find a spot to have the funeral. They find a spot for the funeral. They have a funeral for Tuba, and Hazel sings a song, and the episode ends with them meeting Amelia. Okay, this episode is so dark and sad. Like, Hazel singing the song was so depressing, and they showed like a little bird struggling to fly and shit, and that was terrible. So here's another point I have to make about Hazel being a creation of Amelia. In this episode, we hear Hazel say, "It'd be good to go," as in, it'd be good for me to go to a funeral. And where else do we hear something similar to this? We hear the words, "it'd be good to go," as in go to a funeral, when we listen to Amelia's tape when her husband dies, which answers why Hazel knows it would be good for her to go to a funeral. I find the creation of Hazel to be fascinating, and I wish we got like season 5 in Infinity Train, because it would have been Amelia and Hazel traveling together, which is everything I want from this show. Also, Simon is an asshole still, and I hate him still.
I love this anti-Simon podcast. I am not going to talk much about this episode because it did make me cry. And I am going to cry again if I talk about it. But overall, really good episode. And I'm kind of jealous that a 6-year-old could process grief better than me. I know that she's a creation or whatever, but like, I don't know, man. It feels like you stated before, she is the creation of Amelia. It feels like this is a like tiny part of Amelia that, how do I say, it feels like it was a tiny part of Amelia that was sort of like taken out of her, and I don't even know how to explain it.
That was taken off her and put into like single person.
Yeah, and how do I say it? Not juxtaposition, but it's so interesting to see that because she's like not like defective or whatever, but she's not an exact copy of Amelia, so she obviously like sees and feels things differently. So the fact that she still has a part of Amelia, but she processes things differently is really interesting, because it's sort of like, what if Amelia reacted differently a little bit?
Then she wouldn't be on the train.
Maybe she would have tried to fucking kill herself.
But that's just theory. A game theory. Episode 7. Amelia explains that there's something wrong with the train car and that there's a glitch. Simon says that the conductor has been trying to kill them, and Amelia shoots that down. We learned that the glitch of the train car has to do with turtles and college campuses. Basically, everything that Amelia has built has caused the train to glitch out. They decide to run away from Amelia. Grace snaps at Simon because Simon wants to look at her number. Simon leaves to see the cat. Simon tells the cat that there's something wrong with Grace and her number keeps going down. We learn that the cat's name is Samantha, and the cat warns Simon not to look into Grace's tape, but he decides he's going to anyways, and that's the end of the episode. Again, I know Grace is clearly struggling with a lot of things at the moment, but she keeps acting terrible to Simon, and I still hate Simon, but it's really freaking frustrating to watch. I wish we got to see her act somewhat nice to Simon, because they seemed like such good friends in the beginning of this series. You obviously disagree with me, I know, but like, I don't know, just act nicer to your friends, you guys. It shouldn't be that hard. Also, I've been wondering about this. Would 1-1 like try to get rid of Hazel if Hazel was supposedly a glitch? Like, I wonder what he'd do with her. She's obviously a glitch and not good for the train.
Oh my gosh, I just thought of a headcanon. Okay, here's my headcanon, guys. Feel free to make a fan fiction about it. Really cool adventures with Hazel and Amelia, right? They bond, obviously. And then they finally meet One One, and it's the same situation with what was her name? River, Mirror Tulip, whatever, where you just gotta finesse the system a little bit and make One a little confused, and then like you're fine. Oh my gosh, that'd be so cute. It's not gonna happen though. Amelia would be considered sexy because she's an older woman who sort of has muscle definition, but she's exempt from that status because she's British. Grace is a queen for putting Simon in his place and yelling at him, and she shouldn't feel sorry for it. That cat is so right for saying, I never lie when I'm telling the truth. We could have done without angry white man rage. I'm super tired of characters like that. Every show or movie I watch, there's always an angry white man that would rather commit violence than process his emotions in a healthy manner. I will say though, I am honestly surprised he also did not punch a hole in a wall. 1 point to him.
Episode 8. A giant snake monster tries to kill Hazel and Grace, but Amelia saves them. Amelia says she's making eggs and she's not good at making any food, but Hazel says she makes the best pancakes. Simon tries to attack Amelia, but Amelia has some kind of force field that stops the attack. Amelia explains that she was the conductor. She didn't like how One did things, so she took over control. She tried to recreate her old life but failed to, and is now working with One to quarantine her old train cars. Simon and Amelia argue about what the numbers truly mean. Simon tries to fight Amelia but fails to, and Hazel turns into a turtle person. Amelia explains that Hazel is one of Amelia's failed attempts of making her husband, and that Hazel's number is Amelia's starting number. Amelia decides they need to quarantine Hazel. Simon uses the robot things the cat gave him to see into Grace's memories. Simon learns that Grace knew that Hazel was a null all along. So we get another clue that Hazel is creation of Amelia in this episode before the big reveal comes in the line, "You make the best pancakes." Like, Hazel just knows that Amelia is good in pancakes. Also, this shows that maybe Amelia was closer to getting Ulrich back than she thought, because Hazel seems to know things about her that Ulrich would know. Also, I just kind of wonder, how come Amelia doesn't know she created Hazel? Like, how she created so many train cars that she doesn't know her own creations anymore? I don't know, I feel like it should have been obvious to her.
I feel like she was like super crazy for a while. So I don't think I'd I feel like she was probably like in a really long manic state. So I think she did a lot that she probably doesn't remember. There is something so calming about people finding out that they worshipped a false prophet. That was fun. I did say Grace was a queen, but she's also a bitch for calling Hazel a knoll. I feel like every attempt they've made to humanize Simon has not worked in the slightest. He's still a little bitch boy.
Episode 9. Hazel decides that she doesn't want to go with Grace and wants to go with Amelia. Amelia, Hazel, Grace, and Simon split ways. Grace cries. Simon makes Grace watch her own tape and Grace thinks she's home. We see her as her parents ignore her and a bunch of babysitters take care of her. We cut to Grace stealing from the mall. Grace says that all she wanted was attention, and we see young Grace get on the train. We see Grace get saved by the conductor. Simon tries to manipulate Grace, but Grace knows that there's something wrong with her own memories of how the conductor saved her. We learn that Grace was the one who saved Simon from the cockroach monster and that the cat left him. Simon traps Grace in her own memories, and that's how the episode ends. So this might be me, but I feel like Hazel leaving with Amelia was a bit rushed. I really wish this season was longer because I feel like the pacing of this episode would have been a lot better, because like it's like immediately at the start of the episode Hazel's just like, I want to leave with Amelia. Like I said before, I have a theory that the train shows up when someone is about to make a bad decision in their life, and we see that happening again in this season. It seemed like Grace was going to run away after stealing, or maybe the train showed up because she stole something. Also, I have mixed feeling on Grace's backstory. The whole neglected rich kid trope isn't the best, but at the same time they managed to pull off the backstory well. I wonder if the cult that Grace started was originally on accident. Like, it seemed like it could have been Simon that helped push Grace in that way, or maybe she did this all on purpose. I wish we got to see how Grace started the cult in the first place, because it seemed like Grace and Simon were two tagging that kid during the memory we were showed. Also, I like the metaphor of not being able to remember the caretaker she had. It was a cool touch.
Obviously, Hazel and Tuba were meant to help Grace, but as you stated before, Hazel's departure was way too soon, and I don't like that it sorta ended on sort of a negative note, which I feel like is a part of my issues with this season as a whole. During her flashback, I really liked how they like, as you stated before with the babysitter, I really liked how they only showed the outfit of the babysitter. The way I saw it is it was to show that the babysitters were replaceable and they were just meant to sort of occupy Grace, and she was never really able to bond with them. I also like that in the flashback, the false conductor first looked like this huge shadowy being when she was a kid, but retrospectively, it was much smaller and less ominous. That was sort of something we saw in season 1 too, where, you know, when we're looking at a kid's perspective, things seem so much like bigger and more emphasized. Once again, fuck Simon.
Okay, episode 10. We see Grace is still stuck in the tape. Fake Hazel calls out Grace for only caring about herself. Grace explains that she did everything to not end up alone, and that's exactly how she ended up. Grace is forced out of her tape. She fixes the paper birds Simon destroyed in the last episode. She goes to the mall car. We see Simon start calling Grace a void. Then Simon and Grace start to argue about who's the true leader. Grace and Simon get into a fight. A cockroach monster shows up and starts sucking out the life out of Grace. Grace saves Simon, but Simon wheels Grace, but Grace survives because the paper bird saved her. Simon starts laughing hysterically and his number goes up a lot. The cockroach monster kills Simon and the cockroach monster also explodes. Grace tells everybody that everyone on the train is on the train for a different reason and they can't be the apex anymore and they have to figure out what to do next. And that's how the episode ends. So the first thing I want to talk about is the cockroach monster exploding. Like, what the fuck was that? I'm just so curious about the cockroach monsters. I really want to know what they are. Like, they just suck out the life out of people and explode. Like, what does that mean? Because obviously the train was like man-made, right? My theory is that the train was made by someone. Like, obviously not by people, but by some. But I'm just really curious about the cockroach monsters because they just kill people and explode.
It's sort of like mosquitoes, you know? They have no real purpose.
Simon laughing hysterically was scary.
I love that he was fucking bawling his eyes out. Like, he almost had a moment where he was actually just gonna, like, start breaking down and, like, stop laughing and start crying because he killed his fucking best friend.
So I love the beginning scene. It's so powerful. And I love that we get to see her truly say goodbye to Hazel because in this episode, she gets a memory of Hazel saying goodbye to her, and Grace like finally waves goodbye and is like at peace with saying goodbye with Hazel. And I felt like that was needed in this episode before we get to the big fight. Also, I don't know if you noticed this, but when Hazel calls out Grace, we can also hear Grace's voice talking. So it's like both Hazel and Grace herself are calling herself out. I feel like Simon is an amazing villain. We get to see him slowly become darker as a person, so much he would kill his ex-best friend. He deserved what he got because there's no turning back after that.
I don't know, I feel like an amazing villain is just, like, a sexy person.
What? That doesn't make any sense.
No, 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 okay, I'm sorry. My ideal villain is someone okay, is someone who is, first of all, really sexy, and second of all, is not the villain. Like, you know how a lot of comic book villains are like, "Guys, we're fucking oppressed, and there are actually, like, bad people doing bad things, and I'm killing them." And then the superhero will be like, "Maybe you are oppressed or whatever, but you shouldn't kill bad people." I don't know, there are so many villains who are actually good people, and I think that's what makes a good villain, when they're not the villain. I'm glad Grace finally accepted the fact that she has been a piece of shit. Also, her pulling out her tape was fucking disgusting. The fact that like she threw up a little bit, that was gross. I've never read Lord of the Flies, nor will I ever. I'm just gonna assume that whatever Simon did to those kids is what happened in that book. The juxtaposition of this man boy manipulating and brainwashing literal children to do his bidding is so fucking funny. I wish his death was longer and more painful. It was a pretty nice death scene though. I really loved to see him literally melt, bone and all. I did like that he was murdered by the thing that traumatized him as a kid, but I would just like to see more pain.
At the end of the episode, Grace's number goes down by a lot. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like the number was like too low. Like, I feel like it should have been a bit higher because I feel like she hasn't grown enough.
Okay, because I feel like she got a lot of those numbers from fucking manipulating children and shit. Her accepting the fact that she was a bad person probably was the reason why it went down so much, because her not accepting that fact was what really like negatively affected a lot of people.
Overall, I really loved this season. It was dark, but it was really well written. I just really wish it would have been a lot longer because I feel like we needed some, like, I don't know, some padding in between the big scenes. I really liked the fight scene on the season finale. It was greatly animated, and yeah, this season was great.
Overall, I don't know how I feel about this season because the things that I liked, I really liked. And the things that I hated, really hated. It was also a really emotionally heavy season. They were mostly emotions I do not like. I think Grace did a lot to be redeemed, but at the end of the season, she wasn't redeemed in my eyes. Obviously, it's gonna be a longer process for her. I think the ending was fitting, but I did not like it. Like you said before, we didn't see her exit, and that was the first time that that's happened in the show. I was actually so surprised that this was the last episode in the season. I honestly thought that another episode was just gonna pop up, but it does make sense because she's done so much damage to so many people. There just wasn't enough time for her to rectify all of that in one season. Once again, Infinity Train left me wanting more. Like, I'm still so interested in Hazel, and honestly, in my opinion, she was the main character. I would just really like to see the dynamic between her and Amelia, but I guess we'll never see that.
Yeah, I highly doubt we'll ever get another season.
If he ever gets his IP back, probably. Because even if he fucking GoFunded me that shit, do you know how many fucking emotionally damaged fucking little gay people would pay for that shit?
Anyways, you guys, those are our thoughts on Infinity Train Season 3. If you want to send us a voice message on Anchor, there's a link in the description below to do that. We also have an Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, which are also in the description below. And that's everything, so goodbye. Oh wait, also, we're almost close to hitting 300 plays, I think.
So listen to all of our episodes over and over and over again.
Yeah, and download them.
But I will make another shirt.
Oh yeah, Mel made a shirt when we hit 100 plays.
Ironically, of course.
Anyways, that's everything. Goodbye.